All right. Thank you, Simeon. My name's John Dunn from Indiana University. I'm going to lead things off and then hand over to my fellow presenters for some of the various topics we're covering in this presentation. So we're talking here about an open source software development project in the repository space known as Avalon. That has been underway for some time, and some of the challenges that we are confronting as software matures from a feature standpoint, from a technology standpoint, and things change around it in terms of technology dependencies, in terms of user expectation, in terms of institutional settings and otherwise. To start with, I'm going to give a very brief kind of background on Avalon for those of you who aren't familiar with it. For those of you who are, this may be review. But Avalon is an open source software system that's been co-developed by Northwestern University and Indiana University Libraries to make it easier for libraries and archives to provide online access to audio and video collections. And really audio and video collections in the broadest sense. So Avalon's been designed to support everything from online video reserves to archival collections to teaching collections, et cetera, the range of audio and video collections that one might find across a large academic or university library system. Avalon is a Samvera, formerly Hydra solution bundle, meaning that it is based on the Samvera technology stack, and it's as a solution bundle designed to be able to be relatively easily installed by an institution that doesn't have a deep knowledge and experience level with that stack. And that's achieved through documentation, through various installation scripts, provide a number of different means of installation to get up and running. So the goals have been to make it easily installable, configurable, to serve a variety of use cases. And then one of the things we'll focus on in this talk is to create a basis for sustainable development and evolution of the product going forward. Avalon is currently in production at least 8 institutions. We'd like to see that grow substantially. But it's actually, we're pretty happy with that number, as it's forming a solid base of use to help inform a lot of the choices that we make going forward. We chose to develop Avalon for 2 main reasons. One is there are obviously a lot of repository applications out there, including other Hydra, Samvera, Fedora-based repository front ends, and some of them can deal with audio and video content, at least to the level of putting an audio or video file into the repository that it can essentially serve back out for download. But they don't necessarily provide a lot of functionality that is needed for some use cases around AV. In particular, for example, audio and video tends to be fraught with rights issues, and so very granular access control ends up being key to a lot of use cases. In addition, there are other forms of kind of navigation and movement through the time-based nature of audio and video that are very helpful to have versus just, okay, here's a video file, play it back. At the same time, there are other kind of media management, digital asset management, online video environments out there, things like Kaltura, ShareStream, and others that do a very good job of serving audio and video files, but they don't necessarily fit well with library workflows and metadata. They don't necessarily they're not necessarily designed to serve kind of long-term access and preservation needs. Often in universities, they're implemented to serve very kind of short-term ephemeral use cases around teaching content for particular current courses and course sections. And so we wanted with Avalon to kind of try to bring these 2 worlds together and not reinvent either one of them, but kind of leverage the best of both repositories and media streaming, media serving environments. So I mentioned Avalon development's been underway for a while. So we have about 7 years of work behind us, about 6 years of active development. And if I add in Avalon's predecessor project, Avalon, that some of you may be familiar with, the Variations digital music library system, that development actually goes back about 25 years. And so there's a lot that can happen over that time. I should note that Avalon has been funded through a combination of grants from the Institute of Museum and Library Services and the Andrew Mellon Foundation, and we're very thankful for that. But one of the things we've been trying to do for a while is to kind of move Avalon to a sustainable basis where if that grant funding goes away, which it will at some point, that we can really keep the product evolving to meet user needs and to meet technical needs. So within the current Mellon grant, we're working on additional, which is kind of in a wrap-up phase. We are developing additional functionality for Avalon. We're doing some user studies that we've talked about at some other conferences. We are trying to get that kind of sustainable model. I think that's going to kind of morph somewhat into the next grant to work on. And we've done work around SaaS and cloud-hosted Avalon that Michael and Aviva will talk about in their sections. We've put out quite a number of releases of Avalon. The current release, 6.0, released a few months ago, is the first Fedora 4-based release of Avalon. We're really excited about that. We moved that into production at IU just about a week ago, and it's been very successful so far. Northwestern has also moved their environment to Fedora 4-based Avalon 6. And then Michael will talk about Avalon 7, which we're especially excited about, which really is key to some of the things that we're talking about here in terms of sustainability. Very quickly, Avalon provides a number of features, standard Hydra-based features, but some of or Sambera, some of the more specific things I'll mention are a video player that it works on desktop and mobile and is embeddable into a lot of different contexts. Support for navigation, won't be able to see this very well, unfortunately. Navigation by structure, kind of a hierarchical table of contents of the audio or video files that one can use to navigate to key points within the video. Ingest mechanisms supporting interactive file upload, Dropbox kind of watched folder mechanism, batch mechanism, as well as a REST API for content and metadata ingest and updating. So a number of different ways to hook up workflows. And one of the biggest focuses, as I mentioned, has been access control. So access control can be done at an item level or a collection level by user, by group, by external groups, such as a group defined in an LDAP directory or Microsoft Active Directory server, by IP address range, and a number of other factors to support a lot of different use cases around researcher and student access. And one of those use cases is access through a learning management system. So this is a shot of Avalon in Northwestern's instance of the Canvas learning management system. Access and authentication provided via the Learning Tools Interoperability, LTI, protocol, which is key to a lot of teaching and learning use cases and systems. So that's what Avalon does. And now we're going to all move into to talking about some of the challenges that we're facing and how we're confronting those. So some of the challenges that I'll mention that have sort of impacted the project. One is over time we've had transitions of staff, and in fact some key staff. And so in about actually a 9-month period, we lost or didn't key leadership roles in both Indiana and Northwestern universities. Both of our co-product owners, project director at Northwestern, another key stakeholder at Northwestern. And so, we certainly had some slowdown as we sort of new people came into those roles and kind of and had to become acquainted with the project and its goals and kind of reset kind of our group shared understanding and trust. I think that the two institution partnership model has been actually very helpful to that, in that one institution could help with the kind of sustainability of the project through changes at the other, and vice versa. But of course, there are still other changes that happen. We've both had some slight changes in our staffing models in terms of how we allocate developers to projects, and kind of being aware of those across the two institutions has sometimes been a little bit of a challenge. Of course, priorities, and I think Michael will get into this some more, can differ. In terms of driving adoption, what we found is to really get adoption requires continued engagement over and over with potential adopters, and having a staff person to do that, and we had that, and then didn't have that, and we're going to have that again soon. That's key. And then I can talk more about some of these in the questions because I'm running over time, but another key thing has been how we convert adoption into actual investment in the product. So how do adopters become developers or financial investors? And one of the issues we found with something that is designed to be somewhat turnkey like Avalon is that part of the reason people adopt it is because they may not have developers or may not have developers they want to put on this particular type of effort. And so that's been a challenge to get developer resources from adopters. Michael will talk about some of the technical debt issues that pose problems for that. Also, just in terms of financial contributions, we've pursued that a little bit, but people kind of figuring out, okay, where do I contribute, and how does my contribution to DuraSpace or Fedora or Hydra, or what, why would I contribute specifically to Avalon? How do I want to do that in relation to these other things, and kind of how we market that and promote that type of financial contribution opportunity? We still haven't really gotten our hands around fully. So with that, I will turn things over to Michael to talk about some of the technical and project management challenges.
Hi, I'm Michael Klein. I'm the software development tech lead at Northwestern University, and the tech lead on the Northwestern side of our collaboration. As John said, when a project starts to mature and get out there, it develops some challenges that weren't there at the beginning. We have been a little behind on keeping up with changes in the underlying technology. We really wanted to manage our transition from a Fedora 3 based stack to a Fedora 4 based stack really well. There are a lot of considerations that go into the timing of our ability to transition in a project like this, and I'll get into that on the next slide. But along with that goes the transition to active Fedora and the Hydra Samvera stack. 8, which was all Fedora 3 based, into 9, and now 10, and now 11. We're still trying to develop a good system of tracking the changes on the technology stack side. Getting our dedication to supporting RTMP servers that has been there since the beginning. We're really trying to move away from that. We've supported RTMP on the desktop and HLS for mobile streaming up until now. Moving to MPEG-. Everyone seems to be coalescing around MPEG- now. So our ability to move to that is important to us. And again, it's a matter of how do we make that transition without leaving our users and our stakeholders behind. Cross-browser streaming support is another thing. It's a moving target. It's starting to settle down now, but it's kind of like CSS was about 3 or 4 years ago, where every browser is doing its own thing, and we're still waiting to see what the major players settle on and what becomes consensus in the way that the internet sort of develops its own standards. And I'm not going to be as profane as my slide is on this last data point, but Adobe Flash has been kind of a thorn in our side for our dependence on it on the desktop, and our user experience with it, and the fact that we're not only having to deal with what version of browser people are using, but also what version of Flash they have installed, whether they have plugins disabled, whether all kinds of things like that. Flash has really increased our the cost of our support and the amount of time we spend supporting certain issues. The development team, as every development team does, the longer a project is in development, faces the issue of developing new features versus addressing technical debt. We all develop technical debt. We need to refactor things. We need to revisit decisions that maybe weren't great or weren't as flexible, or adaptable to new technologies as they were before, instead of continuing to build on the same scaffolding. But the more we build on top of it, the harder it is to rip out the underpinnings and rework them. There's always a lot of push and pull with that. Users and sources of funding want to see new features. It's easier to show people and demonstrate new features than it is to stand up in front of a room and say, this does exactly what it did last year, only it's better underneath, just trust me. That's a constant struggle that I think a lot of any developer can relate to. One challenge we face is our distributed team. A lot of projects, especially the Samvera core, faces this issue. We have developers all over the place, but there's a situation with Avalon in which we are a grant-funded core project that has a deliverable. It is the Avalon Media System. We want to deliver a turnkey system that is downloadable and installable. We create a product. Indiana University is a consumer of that product. Northwestern University is also a consumer of that product, and the same developers who work on the core team are also responsible for implementing our institution-specific rollouts of that product. So we each have a fork, we each develop our own site-specific features and branding and authentication plugins and other stuff on our fork, and it's both a drain in terms of focus, whereas sometimes developers might be working in core, sometimes they might be working in institution-specific features, production support, other issues, and our users also have demands of us, institution-specific demands of us that aren't necessarily something that we can roll into core. So knowing how to focus ourselves and divide up our time and our priorities among these three different, the push and pull of these three different demands can be very tricky in a project of this size. And finally, I want to talk about community integration. This is where we're going from here. We have decided with Avalon 7 that we're going to develop a more modular system. We've been very focused until now on the solution bundle, as John pointed out. The single download, installable, here's the roadmap to set up the dependencies, get everything up and running, and then maybe, change the header and the footer so that you can brand it a little bit. But really, everybody's running the same application. What we still want to offer a solution bundle, but it's going to be a bundle built out of modules that we develop on top of Hyrax and the ongoing work within the Samvera community. We also, so far we've gotten to the point where we have our player pulled out as a separate module. Instead of using our proprietary format, it uses IIIF manifests to discover and play back its stuff. We are working to develop a Hyrax work type. We have a whole lot of stuff in the works, both to contribute to the community as modules and to roll into our solution bundle. And we're also, Northwestern is currently piloting Avalon on Amazon Web Services with a lot of great work borrowed from the Hydra in a Box project and the underlying stack. And that has freed us from some of our dependencies on the transcoder that we were bound to and certain other pieces, and really let us focus on Avalon as its own product. I'm going to turn things over to Aviva now to talk about the way forward.
Okay. I'm going to try and be really, really quick so that we'll actually give you an opportunity for some questions. So just to basically talk a little bit about some of the lessons learned. About a year and a half ago, as part of the Mellon Grant, we had a meeting with an advisory board where we spent about 2 days kind of going through, I guess it was only a day, going through some of the things that we wanted to do to really make Avalon a sustainable project long term. So you'll see that really what they were talking about was having a clearly defined focus on what our core product actually is, ensuring that Avalon is actually complementary, not overlapping with anything, really trying to come up with a way of making it modular and usable across the existing repository system. So instead of having to run your own Avalon instance, you could really integrate it with other things. That our partnerships needed to be chosen wisely, that the groups that we were working with as far as our moving forward pathway really needed to be very thoughtful and really in line with what the community's needs were. In addition to that, we were really concerned about integration with a variety of research and analysis tools, and you'll see when we start talking a little bit about the IMLS grant how that's going to come out. So we applied for and received a $960,000+ IMLS grant that starts in 3 days. So there are 4 core things that this grant will be focusing on, and as you saw from what Michael talked about, this is really kind of building on what we've already been moving forward with, but it's really about implementation and ultimately hopefully making Avalon a sustainable project that won't need outside grant help, because we'll be able to leverage existing repository open source communities that are doing this kind of work already. So the first thing you'll see is that one of the things that we wanted to do was actually integrate Avalon into the existing Samvera code base. So we've been doing that, and we're going to continue to do that. So as Michael was talking about, that modularization, so we'll be pulling out the components that are necessary so that you can use the Avalon pieces in your existing repositories. We're going to be piloting a cloud-based version of Avalon, and we've actually been working with Lyricist to get that set up. We are expecting to try and run that pilot this fall. It may be a little bit further out just because it's already almost July, but we've got a number of institutions identified and we're speaking to about that, so we're pretty excited about that. So improved media preservation. So currently Avalon is not actually a preservation system. So what we're hoping to do is work with Archivematica, so our artifactual systems on their Archivematica product, to be able to do things like get premise data, et cetera, so that you can have that tracking information that you need to make it actually a preservation repository system. And then, of course, we're going to be working on a IIIF AV interoperability spec, which we're really excited about. And that work has already been started and is, I think, relatively far along. So we're really looking forward to some more work in that. There's other things that we're doing that are also around that standardization piece, but we're really trying to make Avalon a product that can work with what already exists. So we have 2 minutes left, and so I'm going to basically end it up here. But really what we're trying to do is create a robust open source developer community around Avalon. So as we start pulling out the component pieces of Avalon, as we start working with groups like, oh my God, I can't believe DCE, we're getting a better idea of what we need to do to start getting communities in to be able to start working on our code base. And I'll just stop there so we can actually have a chance to talk. There you go. Thanks.
Speeding down the home straight there. Once again, please wait for the microphone, but questions?
Hello, I'm Catherine from Griffith Uni. So I'm actually quite interested. One of the features that you have that is to import from Dropbox. So may I know what's the reason behind, and then how do you do that? Thank you.
Yeah, our use of Dropbox on the screenshot is a little bit, it's a sticking point. We have what we call a Dropbox, but it is not Dropbox.com. But, okay, there's a lot to this. Our Dropbox is a server-side file repository that people can upload things to sort of sideload content via non-HTTP methods, because it's not great to transfer a 40 gig file over HTTP. So they can upload it there, click the button, browse for it, point to it, and import it. We are also using a Samvera gem called Browse Everything that allows attaching files from other sources. It's not fully wired up yet, but configuring that correctly does allow sourcing of content from Dropbox, SkyDrive, Box.com, Amazon S3, Google Drive.
I'm curious about the integration with Archivomatica, and I'm wondering if people that you talk to, potential adopters, were really looking for a full preservation backend to it, or what was the driving factors for taking that part on?
Yeah, I think people are looking for a variety of things. So institutions are at a variety of, who are dealing with AV in one way or another at a variety of different points with respect to preservation. Some of them have a preservation environment, some of them don't. And I think what we found is that the way that someone might want to integrate either Archivomatica or a separate preservation repository, or try to use Avalon more as a preservation repository, varies a lot by institution. And so we haven't, actually I think we have a call in a week or two to kind of start to more fully flesh out that work with Archivomatica, but we identified a number of possible different kind of integration approaches there that would be useful for different situations. So for example, we've talked to institutions that want to use Avalon as essentially a way to ingest audio and video from a variety of different sources for access, but then be able to feed that into something like Archivomatica for characterization, additional metadata extraction, and deposit into a preservation environment. Vice versa, some people may want to bring things into Archivomatica first and then feed from Archivomatica into Avalon, either for access or for preservation. So the goal is to be flexible. I don't think we intend a kind of one-size-fits-all model. And at Indiana, for example, we have a separate preservation repository, Samvera-based for AV, that we're co-developing with WGBH that I'll be talking about in a session tomorrow called Hydrodam 2 or FIDO. And so I think the goal is to be flexible, and I think as part of the IMOS grant, we will be gathering more information from users and potential users about kind of what they want to see in that integration.
We have time for one more, I think.
Hi, you talked early on about assessing the landscape of video platforms that are out there, like Kaltura, for example, and you mentioned that there were some things about those systems that were not very compatible with preservation or those kind of things, but now you're saying using a separate service, Archivomatica, for that particular kind of thing. I'm just curious, what were the particular features that Kaltura didn't have, particularly when you discuss the technical challenges of keeping ahead with video, which has all new standards and issues and transcoding and things that come up all the time?
Okay. So yeah, Kaltura and those online video environment platforms, I think, are great for dealing with the basics of the mechanics of video, as you say, the ability to upload a file and then be able to just depend on that service to maintain its access going forward in terms of transcoding to new formats, et cetera. The places where we have generally kind of found the gaps have been around metadata support, around granular access control, supporting a variety of different access control scenarios, integration with kind of library archive workflows, things like Archivomatica. Of course, Kaltura continues to develop as well, and preservation metadata, yes, or something else it doesn't deal with. Interestingly, a number of Avalon adopters are also Kaltura users. We use Kaltura. Okay. University of Virginia, for example, uses Kaltura, and there's kind of a path we've seen people go through where it's, okay, we have Kaltura as our campus solution. Let's try to use it for library stuff. Oh, wait, we there's some issues there in terms of not having something totally different for audio and video from what we do for other formats. And then it becomes more a matter of how can we get Kaltura and something like Avalon or another repository to talk to each other, and things maybe more ephemeral, things migrate from Kaltura to that maybe longer term access environment. So, but a lot of different potential scenarios there.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.